end to John Williams there. Hello, thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you especially to my dad for driving down from Manchester. It's very nice. He'll regret it. It's quite typical that comedians will begin their act by telling a little anecdote about a journey that went horribly wrong. So it's a bit difficult to tell an anecdote when you live on the next street. It's very difficult to have a terrible journey. But I did, however, stop in the newsagents to buy my favourite gossip magazine, which is Chat magazine. Chat magazine, you may have heard of course. It's a French magazine all about cats. Le Chat magazine. Actually took me a considerable amount of time to put this together, and I'm particularly proud of this. Paralysed by a stroke at just 26. I mean, 26 is obviously a very good age for a cat, but paralysed just by a single stroke. So it's a very great tragedy. One of the best things about living in Bristol, of course, is this man. Charlie from Casualty. Bristol was where Casualty was filmed for a long time. So as you wander the streets of Bristol, at any moment you could bump into Charlie from Casualty. The reason Charlie from Casualty is in the show is because my mum was especially fond of Charlie from Casualty. Mum. Yeah, she used to have a bit of a crush on Charlie from Casualty. She said that she found him endearing because he really struggles to make eye contact with people. So I was sort of interested in this. So what I did was I went online and I found the first random sample of Casualty, the first episode of Casualty I could possibly find, and it was this one. And let's just have a look and see if Charlie from Casualty really does struggle with eye contact. Was my mum right, or was she wrong?
Have you any idea what I did with Mr. Fisher's blood results?
You sent them up to the ward.
Of course I did.
Have you had a chance to talk to him about towering yet? Not yet. No? Well, perhaps this would help.
Well, this is obviously massive, shocking news that Charlie may be retiring from Casualty. But I think we can conclude from that Charlie from Casualty does seem to struggle with eye contact. If I was to discuss the sensitive issue of Mr. Fisher's blood results with anyone in the audience, I'd seek them out. I'd look them in the eye and I'd say, Mr. Fisher, he's got anemia. It's awful. But Charlie, he really seems to struggle with eye contact. You might think, why on earth is he telling me this? But it will all become clear. Anyway, dinosaur shows, dinosaur programs, dinosaur books, anything about dinosaurs, dinosaur documentaries, they always begin like this. This is a tried and tested formula. If you watch out for this, you'll see what I mean. They always start off and they always say, we're in a land of towering forests. We're in a land of towering forests, and we're in a land of towering forests and shallow lakes. The land of towering forests and shallow lakes, and the land of towering forests and shallow lakes and sauna-like temperatures, that land of towering forests and shallow lakes and sauna-like temperatures. And there were dinosaurs, and there were dinosaurs. There's a brachiosaurus, pterodactyl, a triceratops, a stegosaurus, and a T-Rex, a mighty T-Rex. But then, 65 million years ago, through the heavens screamed an asteroid hell-bent on killing lizards. It's terrible. It's like, no, the asteroid streaked through the sky and caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. A massive tragedy. And maybe we could have some theatrical oars as we mourn the loss of the brachiosaurus and the stegosaurus, triceratops and pterodactyl, and there they go. There they go, they've gone. And we're just left with the land of towering forests and shallow lakes and sauna-like temperatures. And I've never understood this about the land of towering forests and shallow lakes and sauna-like temperatures, because so few of these stories are ever set in Sweden. And yet, our story begins in Sweden. I used to live in Sweden, and when I lived there, I read this newspaper article. And then there were 8. Goodbye, Pluto. Now this is the story of the International Astronomical Union, who, with a democratic show of hands, voted Pluto out of the solar system. It's really rather interesting. For a while, we almost got 3 new planets. If Pluto was to remain as a planet, these would have to have become planets. We would have had a planet discovered in 2003 by the name of UB313. There it is, UB313, just outside of the Kuiper belt. UB313. It's named UB313, of course, to avoid confusion with pop legends UB40. But then the International Astronomical Union, they had a think, and they realised that, well, one of these planets would be called Sharon. And you can't have a planet called Sharon, not unless you change UB313's name to Wayne, and Ceres's name to Brittany. And that's not so much a universe as a Chaviverse. So the International Astronomical Union, with a democratic show of hands, voted Pluto out of the solar system. Now there are some empty seats there, and it turns out that quite a lot of these astronomers went home early and didn't bother to stay for the Pluto vote, which I thought was a shame. I thought, given that these are people who are patient enough to spend their nights looking out across space and time with a chocolate hobnob and a cup of tea, I was surprised that they wouldn't stay to vote on whether Pluto was a planet. But nevertheless, it was a democratic vote. And in reading that article, it made me write a letter. It made me write a letter to this man, Sir Patrick Moore. And in this letter, I said, "Dear Sir Patrick, I recently attended an exhibition at the Natural History Museum in London." The Natural History Museum in London, of course, looks a little bit like a giant sandcastle. And I pulled up on a red Routemaster bus, and I stepped off with my Starbucks coffee. I've been told the streets of London were paved in gold. Well, that's nonsense. They're not even paved in pyrite. Nevertheless, I stepped into the museum. I was excited to be there. I was excited to be there because of this exhibition. This man is Dr. Jack Horner. Dr. Jack Horner had suggested that T-Rex was not that vicious, jeep-chasing beast we all have in our Jurassic Park imaginings. He'd said that T-Rex was 100% scavenger, a ne'er-do-well, some sort of giant scavenging crow. Now, as I wandered around this exhibition, I was presented with arguments and counter-arguments. T-Rex had a great sense of smell. Wolves have a great sense of smell, and they're vicious predators. Some vultures have a good sense of smell, and they're scavengers. An exhibition then of arguments and counter-arguments. And I tend to avoid counter-arguments. If I go into Sainsbury's and I say to the girl on the deli, "Can I have some cut meat?" and she says, "Oh, it's just over, my love, is that all right?" I'll say, "Yeah, that's fine," because I avoid counter-arguments. And in doing so, well, it serves me well. I've been given a voting slip, and when I got to the end of the exhibition, there were 3 boxes. There was a box for T-Rex was 100% scavenger, a box for T-Rex was 100% predator, and this kind of batted for both a predator and a scavenger box. And you might think that with that third option there, I'd hedge my bets and dash out into the South Kensington sunshine. But hedging is for the topiary artist. That's a doctrine I've always lived by. So I didn't do that. Instead, I got the train home. I was living in the Lake District at that point in time. I got the train home to the Lake District. I stepped off the train and I went home, and I went to my housemate, Joe Margaret. So I said, "Joe, I've been to an exhibition at the Natural History Museum, been given a voting form. I was given a choice of predator, 100% scavenger, or batted for both. Joe, I've not cast my vote. And the next morning, as the sun rose over the Lake District National Park, Joe, who's shorter than me and wears glasses, got the train to London. And he arrived at the Natural History Museum, and I told him the streets of London weren't paved in gold. And he stepped off the Routemaster buzz and he went into the museum. He wandered round the museum and he considered the evidence, and he came back with his voting form still in his hand, just as I had done. A confused and worried gent. And he came back to me and he said, Matt, you're right. I've been to the Natural History Museum. I've been around the Killer Question exhibition. I've been given those three choices: predator, scavenger, batted for both. I've not cast my vote on sight. And I'm sure you would have done what me and Joe did in that situation. We founded a science foundation. We called it the Hawkshead Science Foundation on account of living in Hawkshead. And we gave ourselves a catchy tagline, depicting Rex fiction as facts dereliction, which absolutely trips off the tongue. And in recognition of our work to date, we awarded ourselves 2 honorary doctorates, making us Dr. Matt Brierley and Dr. J.J. Margetts. And then we did what you no doubt would have done in this situation. We wrote a letter. We wrote a letter to the Natural History Museum. And this is what we said. Dear T-Rex vote auditor/expert, I recently visited your T-Rex the Killer Question exhibition at your excellent museum. However, I did not cast my vote on sight because I needed time to digest the evidence and weigh up the facts. After considerable contemplation and several sleepless nights, I feel I can assert with conviction that T-Rex was, in fact, a pack hunter. And that was my idea, that T-Rex was a pack hunter and hunted in teams or packs known as Hammonds, named after John Hammond, the founder of Jurassic Park. The Natural History Museum wrote back, thank you for your recent letter following your visit to T-Rex the Killer Question. I am pleased to learn you found the exhibition sufficiently thought-provoking that it has given you opportunity to contemplate the lifestyle of Tyrannosaurus Rex. Although I am sorry to learn that it caused you several sleepless nights. And down here, the exhibition aims to present scientific evidence about how T-Rex might have lived. There is hard evidence from fossil remains that small meat eaters were pack hunters. There is no such evidence for T-Rex. Yours sincerely, Angela Milner, Dr. Angela C. Milner, the Associate Keeper of Paleontology at the Natural History Museum in London. Years passed. I was waiting for a plane in Schiphol Airport in Holland, and I saw this journal on the shelf. This was a good 2 years after I'd written to the Natural History Museum, and I'd forgotten all about it. Now, this dinosaur is an Allosaurus. It's got quite a powerful resting bitch face there. That face actually went on to inspire Victoria Beckham, if the rumours are true. But I was very interested in this. It says on the front, T-Rex Unleashed. So I opened it up, and this is what I saw. Mounting evidence indicates that tyrannosaurs were not loners, but moved in groups. Mounting evidence indicates that tyrannosaurs were not loners, but moved in groups. Tyrannosaurs in herds, with complex interrelationships, are in many ways an entirely new species to contemplate. Not to me. And I love this next line, but science has not morphed them into a benign and tender collection of Cretaceous Care Bears. No, never fall into that classic paleontological trap. never morph a T-Rex into a benign and tender Cretaceous Kerber. And accompanying this piece was some artwork. This artist has gone to the trouble to capture the majesty of a Hammond of T-Rex. And there they are, and I think he's done a terrific job. It was a beautiful thing. I was so absorbed in this artwork that I almost missed my plane. I sprinted for the departure gate. I just got on the plane in time. The plane took off and I looked out of the window and I saw the twinkling lights of Amsterdam beneath me. And as I was watching that, some lines came into my mind. I'd not thought about them for a very long time. And I remembered them gradually, and then almost word for word. And when I got in that night, I found a letter I'd not looked at for over 2 years, and this was the letter. The exhibition aims to present scientific evidence and logical deduction about how T-Rex might have lived. There is hard evidence from fossil remains that small meat-eaters were pack hunters. There is no such evidence for T-Rex. Yours sincerely, Angela Milner. Dr. Angela C. Milner, the Associate Keeper of Paleontology at the Natural History Museum in London. Well, I wondered what it was that Jack Horner had that I didn't have. Why would people listen to Jack Horner's scavenger hypothesis but not listen to my Hammond hypothesis? And that's when I realised the only thing at that time, and it's fine now because I've grown one now, but at that time, the only difference between us was the beard. So I decided to try and find a beard to represent the Hawkshead Science Foundation. And of course, there was only one man that would fit the bill. Bill Oddie. Dear Bill Oddie, firstly, let me start by congratulating you on your excellent work in the field of wildlife, especially birds television. And the letter goes on, and down here we say, as our theory gathers momentum and press interest, it is time to put a face to the Hawkshead Science Foundation. A face with a beard. Will you do it, Bill? And we sent Bill some artwork to demonstrate what it might look like if he was willing to do that for us. Will you do it, Bill? And Bill Oddie replied. Bill Oddie replied, and this was fantastic. Thank you for your communication for Bill Oddie. But I must admit, when I first received this, I was slightly upset because he said here he regrets that he is unable to offer support to your campaign. He regrets he is unable to offer support to your campaign. And he's ticked a box there, and of course what he means is he regrets that he is unable to offer support to your campaign. But then I looked at this picture of him standing in some bracken, and then I read what he'd written at the bottom, and what fascination information you sent. Thank you. What fascination information you sent. Thank you. Well, if Bill Oddie found our information fascination, and I came back to this with a fresh pair of eyes, because there he's ticked a box that he regrets he is unable to offer support to our campaign. But here, there's a box that he regrets that he is unable to offer a forward for your book. And there's another one there. He regrets that he is unable to attend a function you've organised. Well, there he's ticked the box to say he regrets that he is unable, but here he's left the boxes blank. And that's when I realised Bill Oddie's very clever use of double negatives. And here we all are, the founder members of the Hawkshead Science Foundation, at a function we organised for Bill Oddie. A function that Bill Oddie never attended, despite previously having not specified he was unable to disattend. But I was fascinated. I was fascinated that I was right about T-Rex, absolutely fascinated. So not only did I read that journal article, I read all the articles that were referenced in that journal article. And this is one of them. This is by Ken Carpenter, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that Ken is a Scottish colloquialism for to know, and that the Carpenters wrote Leader of the Pack. So you're naturally thinking that this is a paper about pack hunting in T-Rex. But you'd be very wrong, you'd be very wrong. In actual fact, it's about this dinosaur. This dinosaur is an Edmontosaurus. This is a very special dinosaur in the world of paleontology. So special, it's even made it into a children's book. And I bought this book on eBay, described as the best Kid Rex book ever done. I turned it over and it asked me, are you ready to take the plunge into chapters? And I felt I was. Do you still like books with colourful pictures? And I felt I did. This book is just right for you. This book is just right for you, and it was just right for me, because I opened it up and this is what I saw. Only a living animal can heal. So we know that at least once a T-Rex bit a living duckbill. So this dinosaur, this hadrosaur, this Edmontosaurus, has had its tail bitten by a T-Rex, and the bones have regrown afterwards. They know it was a T-Rex because of the dentition of the bite. And T-Rex was the only predator around at that time that could have inflicted that wound. The bone regrew afterwards. So this is the one that got away. Now all paleontologists know about this. All paleontologists know that T-Rex was an active predator. And this evidence exists. And this evidence existed long before the Natural History Museum commissioned an exhibition to ask whether T-Rex may have been 100% scavenger. Well, I wanted to know more about Jack Horner. It turns out that Jack Horner isn't a doctor. He's an honorary doctor. And I don't have much time for honorary doctors. He's only published on T-Rex once, and this is the book he's written. The Complete T-Rex, How Stunning New Discoveries Are Changing Our Understanding of the World's Most Famous Dinosaur. And it has a hardcover. Well, I bought it, and I opened it up, and it started off well. Because it started off as it should start off. It started off Western North America, 65 million years ago, and the last of the dinosaurs were on the move. They're roaming inland and along the margins of a big, shallow inland lake. It's the land of towering trees and shallow lakes and sauna-like temperatures. And then we got to chapter 9, and I started to get very excited. Was T-Rex a vicious killer? Ask anyone, including most paleontologists, and they'd say yes. Ask me, I'd say no. So I made myself a cup of tea and settled down. And I read this. Even if T-Rex were a good hunter, why should it have spent expensive energy chasing healthy live animals when there was plenty of free food to be had? And I thought, well, that's a good point. And I carved myself a chunky slice of Battenberg. And then I read this. I'm not convinced T-Rex was only a scavenger, though I will say so sometimes just to be contrary and get my colleagues arguing. I'm not convinced T-Rex was only a scavenger, though I will say so sometimes just to be contrary and get my colleagues arguing. And then I dropped my Battenberg in shock, because as I turned the page, I was greeted by these words. In the end, to me, this whole predator versus scavenger debate is a red herring. In the end, to me, this whole predator versus scavenger debate is a red herring. There's only one man in the world who's ever published on T-Rex being 100% scavenger. That man is Jack Horner. In the only place he's published on it, he says he doesn't believe his own theory and considers it to be a red herring. And yet the Natural History Museum in London commissioned an exhibition to ask a question as T-Rex was 100% scavenger. Well, I had to take a leaf out of my dad's book and have a glass of whiskey after that. But the frightening thing was, it got worse. A friend sent me this around about this time. Set in stone. This is the Natural History Museum's internal newsletter. This isn't something a member of the public should ever see. And yet it's an easy Google search. And inside that there was a write-up about the exhibition that I'd attended, Trial by T-Rex. And within that there was this. Despite all the models and supporting arguments, Yet a different exhibition visitor's view was expressed in a recent letter from a gentleman who, after several sleepless nights, feel I can assert with conviction that T-Rex was, in fact, a pack hunter. Now there's an alternative we hadn't considered. Now there's an alternative we hadn't considered. Not now there's something that couldn't possibly be true due to a lack of fossil evidence. Oh no, quietly, behind closed doors, the Natural History Museum had admitted that I might have a point. And who'd sign this? Paul Barrett and Angela C. Milner, the Associate Keeper of Paleontology. Just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, they got worse. I found out that the exhibition hadn't ended. Far from it, I found out it had become a travelling exhibition. Now, I mentioned that I was living in Sweden, so I took the overnight train from Sweden to Denmark. And I arrived at a children's museum for the under-10s called Experimentarium in Copenhagen. I was given this leaflet, this worksheet. It urged me to draw T-Rex, join the lines to complete the picture. So I did. And I sent this to the museum. And I said, "Dear T-Rex auditor / expert, I recently attended the exhibition at your excellent museum. However, after considerable contemplation and several sleepless nights, I've decided I'm going to protest outside your museum. It'll be a peaceful protest with a flask of tea, but nevertheless, I'll have placards and leaflets, and 2 weeks from now, I'm going to come to your museum and protest outside." And I didn't hear anything back. But 2 weeks, loyal to my word, I took the overnight train from Stockholm. I arrived in Copenhagen, and it had snowed. It was bitterly cold. And I arrived at the museum to be greeted by this man. This is museum manager Paul Kotler. Now, Paul, as it turned out, was a very nice man. Because the first thing he said to me was, "Where is your flask of tea?" And I didn't have it, I'd forgotten it. So he made me a flask of tea, which I thought was very kind of him, given that I'd arrived to protest outside his museum. But then Paul was like that. He was a man full of surprises, because the next thing he said was, "I will join you for this protest. I will join you for this protest. I, a man who's commissioned an exhibition that will deceive Danish under-10s, will join you in a protest outside that very exhibition. I will join you for this protest." And that's what Paul did. And we spent a very enjoyable day handing out literature to under-10s. Casting T-Rex as a giant crow is silly. It wasn't a crow, we know that much. Handing out information to students. What fascination information. Bill Oddie, BBC TV wildlife presenter. And at the end of the day, Paul Kotler, who was a man of surprises, turned to me and he said something that made my blood run cold. Because now he said, "So are you also going to Italy? Are you also going to Italy?" And I said, "Why, Paul? Why would I be going to Italy?" He said, "Well, the exhibition's travelling to Cremona in Italy. It's not finished. I presume that you'll be going to Italy. So before we watch a film that charters my progress of how I got on protesting outside a museum for under-10s in Cremona in Italy, let's take a quick lesson in Italian. Cacciatore Paco is pack hunter in Italian.
Good morning, we're here in Florence, Italy, the very heart of Tuscany. Later in the day we'll be hopping in our motor, heading to Cremona, where we're going to lay falsehood and fantasy to rest once and for all. I'm just going to stop typical random Italian gent, see what he knows about the T-Rex packed onto theory. He'll do. Excuse me. Excuse me. If I was to say the words cacciatore pacco to you, what would...
Ne comprende?
Just over there is the Tyrannosaur habit, the den of lies. Dinosauri. Dinosauri.
Dinosauri fabuloso. Sì.
So we have the anarchist's tools.
Plastic bed sheet there, ketchup, paintbrushes. Take one tube of doppio concentrato, some harsh, tasty, artistic license. Apply firmly. It's a lesser known fact that Michelangelo actually painted the Sistine Chapel roof using doppio concentrato and olive oil.
Cacciatore Paco!
Just got to get the museum director to find out whether we can protest inside or if we're going to stay out here. Okay, we're going to go in.
Dovete far la coda.
We're just entering some intense negotiations as to whether we can have the banner there or there. As you can see, we're converting people towards the Hammond hypothesis as we speak. A young girl over there is capturing the magic of the Hammond moment. The tomato sauce.
Don mio!
Chiamo quella per la lotta. Glielo chiediamo adesso.
Amazing, you show up in a foreign country. Diego! Comes out with his roll of sellotape and, you know, we abolish fancy and falsehood just like that. Beautiful. Bellissimo!
That's it. We can go inside.
We can go inside to film, which is brilliant. The word is, we're from the BBC. How that happened, I suppose if you've got a camcorder and you're English, inglese. If I said the words T-Rex pack hunter to you, sir, how would you react? Another believer. By way of demonstration of the Hammond hypothesis, the gregarious social nature of Rex, we're now going to
Make our way down through the crowd,
of the queue.
the length of the queue in a T-Rex pack hunter type hypothetical behaviour.
This kind chap has just invited us into the museum for free. Over here we have a T-Rex. The T-Rex, you can see, lonely, upset, in anguish, solitary, an unnatural stance for a Rex, frankly. And quite a sad one.
Where are its fellow pack? Where are its compatriots? Where are its fellow hunt mates? In a license. Where is the rest of the Hammond?
So this is what the discussion is all about. T-Rex, was it a pack hunter? Now T-Rex, ferocious beast that could run at speed about 25 miles an hour. If he was travelling at that speed, he was hunting, he was an active hunter. And yet think of his prey, he's not going to take one of those on his own. There's about a 50% chance he'll be injured. What's the solution to that? Pack hunting. What's the story in Cacciatore, wouldn't you like to know? Artwork here demonstrating that T-Rex works better as a social beast.
So Matt, how would you say that the demonstration went?
I was really pleased. I feel like the word's really out in Italy now, and that's what we came here to achieve. Yeah, it's nice to be.
Hey, signor dinosaur! Cacciatore Parco, bene, bene, arrivederci.
Well, it certainly looks like that the man on the street in Italy is now aware of your theories. Well done, Matt. Well done. I'd like to shake you by the hand. Good job.
Thanks.
So last night, my mate Dave, that did the light, said to me, "Where did you get that jumper from? T-Rex Max." And he assured me that that joke would have the audience in hysterics, and I told him it wouldn't, and I think I've just won a drink. So that's good. Well, anyway, you'd think I'd be pleased, you'd think I'd be delighted, because I've been to Italy and I'd stopped the rot in Italy. I've been to Denmark and I'd stopped Scandinavian children from being misled. But I couldn't get it out of my mind that 5,791 people had voted for 100% scavenger. I found out about a town in Colorado, a town called Dinosaur. And it had a population of 319 people. And I thought to myself, well, I'm looking for 5,791 people. If I can get that 319 people, I'll be that step closer to finding those people that I need to find. I'd moved back from Sweden, I'd moved to London, and I really wanted to work in wildlife conservation. I really wanted to work for the RSPB. And I've been offered a job interview for the RSPB here in Bristol. I was delighted to be offered the job interview. So I get this text message one morning from my mate Ratty, and here he is. But Ratty knew that I wanted to visit Dinosaur in Colorado. And it says, competition on Virgin Radio. Leave me out of your silly little plans. Leave me out of your silly little plans. So I go onto the Virgin Radio website, and it's an amazing competition. You can win 7 international flights around the world, £1,000 each prize money, £1,000 to spend on car hire. It's an incredible prize. To take part, you have to travel as far as you can from London in just 5 days on a budget of 100 quid. There's going to be four teams, each with 2 people. So anyway, I fill out the online form, and you've got to say the 7 places around the world that you'd visit. So I said, well, I'd visit Dinosaur in Colorado, and I'd visit Kauai in Hawaii to see the Jurassic Park gate, and I gave all the 7 places dinosaur themes. And I get a phone call from Rocky. And Rocky's a researcher on the Christian O'Connell show on Virgin, and he says, we'd like to invite you to take part. Who are you going to bring with you? So I think about the text from Ratty saying, leave me out of your silly little plans, and I say, oh, my mate Ratty. And to cut a long story short, 5 days later, having taken a train from London to Poland for 25 quid, been given a free flight by Central Wings from Warsaw to Hurghada on the Red Sea coast in Egypt, and having hitchhiked down the Red Sea coast in Egypt, we won the competition. Absolutely fantastic. I won a competition. But in doing this, I'd had to ring up the RSPB and I'd had to say, look, terribly sorry, I know you've offered me a job interview, but I'm not going to be able to attend the job interview. I pulled out of the interview process. And it weighed slightly heavily on my heart, but hey, do you know what? We won this incredible competition. But the thing that weighed even more heavily on my heart was when I came into signal at Hurghada Airport, when Virgin were eventually flying us home. I started getting messages. I started getting texts and WhatsApps and Facebook messages and voicemails and emails, and it was great, and so many people had listened to the radio and were congratulating me. But there's one person who's not around anymore, and that's Mum, and I didn't have that message, and she was the one person that I wanted to tell. And I was feeling quite low about this, and Ratty said to me, well, just a second, and he said, isn't that actor your mum used to like? And in the departure lounge was Charlie from Casualty. Charlie from Casualty. And so we got on the plane. We didn't say hello to Charlie. We got on the plane. Charlie got in first class. Me and Rat got in standard class. And I had all the tickets. You had to prove that you'd not overspent this 100 quid. I had all the tickets inside my blazer pocket. All the receipts, all the tickets. And I rolled up my blazer to use it as a pillow on the plane. And when we touched down in Heathrow, and I kind of came to, and I realised that these things might have fallen out of my blazer pocket, but there wasn't time to go through them all. So I said, right, what we'll do, Ratty, is I'll get down on the floor of the plane, and if there's nothing on the floor of the plane, then I know they're all in my pocket. Logic. So, meanwhile, Charlie, he's got wasted in first class, absolutely plastered. And he's waiting and he's shaking people's hand as they get off the plane like he's the Queen. So I find myself two hostesses, Charlie, me and Ratty. I'm on my hands and knees. And Charlie comes over and says, what are you doing on the floor? I explained what I was doing. He said, so you're a man that doesn't know what's in his pockets? I said yes, and well, we got talking to him, and he said, well, how about you get a lift into London with me in my car with my chauffeur? He'll take you wherever you want to go. Fantastic. Thanks very much. And that's what happened. Ratty was in the front with the chauffeur, and I was in the back with Charlie from Casualty. And he told me all sorts of things. He told me the reason that he was drunk was because Jack, his father-in-law, had died while he was in Hurghada. So he'd hit the booze because he was sad about that. But he said that he thought that Jack would really like what we'd done. He said he thought that Jack would consider us to be great adventurers. What we didn't tell Charlie, we didn't tell him about the 100 quid. All we told Charlie was that we tried to get as far from London as we could in 5 days. It just sort of didn't come up. That's not the way the conversation went. Nevertheless, as we pulled up into Kentish Town, Charlie took some money from his wallet. He tucked it into my top pocket. And he said, what I want you to do, I want you to go out, I want you to buy a bottle of Merlot wine and raise a glass to Jack. Will you do that for me? I said, yeah, we will, Charlie. And do you know what? Through that entire conversation, when Charlie said everything that I imagine my mum would have said to me, he never made eye contact once. So we went out for a meal. We bought the bottle of Merlot wine, and opposite the pub, the Angel pub in London, there was a coach. He said on the side, dance your way to the Brit Awards. And I just sort of thought, do you know what, I'm having a really interesting week. I'll have a go at that. And I won. I won tickets to the Brit Awards. And I went to the Brit Awards. And it was a pretty incredible week. So I won tickets to the Brit Awards on the Sunday. On the Monday morning, about 11 o'clock, my phone starts ringing and I answer it and I get a phone call. And it's a lady called Claire Morrison who works for the RSPB. And she says, Matt, just ringing to congratulate you on winning your round the world trip. And I thought, well, this is very nice, you know. This is someone who last week I told I couldn't attend an interview with. She's ringing up, congratulating me. And she said, the thing is, we did interview for the Bristol RSPB job, but we didn't appoint. Would you like to come in for an interview? So I went in for an interview and I got the job. I became the Bristol RSPB officer. Yay! And one of the best things about being an RSPB officer is the people you meet. Because I met Bill Oddie. And I said to Bill Oddie, Bill, I sent you a letter. I asked you to be the beard of our organisation. Turns out Bill Oddie has been in a TV programme called The Truth About Killer Dinosaurs. He's a great advocate of the Hammond hypothesis. So this was wonderful news. It was a pleasure to meet Bill Oddie. He pledged his support. It was great. And the first time I had some holiday from the RSPB, I took my round the world trip that I'd won. And I went to Dinosaur in Colorado. And I met the mayor of Dinosaur, Frida Powell, and she pledged the support of the town. And it was wonderful, it was fantastic. But I decided that I still had over 5,000 people that I needed to find. So I decided to take a show to the Edinburgh Festival. I'd never done anything like this before, but I thought it was a smart way of finding those people that I needed to find. So I went to the Edinburgh Festival and I performed this stand-up show. I got in the Oldham Evening Chronicle, the Manchester Evening News, the Liverpool Echo, the Bristol Evening Post, the Cheddar Valley Gazette, the Western Daily Press. I pretended to live in Norwich and got on the front page of the Eastern Daily Press. I got in the London Evening Standard and I ended up in USA Today. It was great and the show was a big success. And all sorts of people came. This man may look familiar. That's my dad. Yes, Dad will come and support his son when he protests about T-Rex and even drive from Manchester. And he will even wear a T-Rex mask. But no, he will not take off his flat cap. But I did it. I found the 5,471 people that I needed to find. Now, you'll remember that I started the show by talking about this man, Sir Patrick Moore. You remember that I talked about this article where Pluto was voted out of the solar system. And for me, this is how science should be. This is how science should work. There was a democratic show of hands, and all the astronomers got together and they voted Pluto out of the solar system. And that is how science works. I don't think there's any room for egos in science. And I'm pleased that I've done my little bit to push forward the pack hunter theory. And I don't know what all this tells me really. I don't know. There's been several coincidences along the way. And I'm not entirely sure what they mean, but Sir Patrick Moore rang me up when he received my letter. And I went to see him. And, well, it was wonderful sitting with Sir Patrick Moore. I told him the entire story. And he rang me up on a Thursday morning and I went round to his house and I had a cup of tea with him. And as I was sitting with him, I asked him when the next solar eclipse in the UK would be. And he said it would be the 15th of March 2015. And that's what me and Dad did last year. Because Sir Patrick Moore said to me, I won't be around to see that, but you should go. And that was pretty much the conclusion to all the bizarre events that have happened along the way. The conclusion was myself and Dad. So here's the glasses we wore. So let's have a dramatic reconstruction as we look at the stage lights. So there we are. It's like, well, I need to be on this side. It does look a bit like we're at a nuclear test site. But there we are. And the lights went out, and the lights came back on again. And after Dad had fallen asleep in the run-up to it, and we watched a total solar eclipse in the Faroe Islands. And so ended my odyssey. But it's not quite the end. You can sit down if you can see your way, Dad.
Thank you.
Round of applause for Gerald. Just some gentle philosophy is that I've noticed on this journey that if there's something that you want and you point yourself in that direction, then wonderful things will often happen. And on that slightly philosophical note, I'd like to invite you, the audience, to become one of those people that speaks the truth about T-Rex. So if you can all raise your right hand and speak the words as they appear on the screen. We, the audience, support the assertion that T-Rex may have hunted in packs, known as Hammonds. As such, we will tell friends, family, and the strangers we meet at every opportunity, including the girl on the deli counter. And in doing so, I will become one of the 5,791 plus people who speak the truth. Because after all, without truth, all we really have is a vicious pack of lies. Thank you so much for coming to see my show. Thank you for taking the pledge.